Everybody, it's Chris and Lumen here, and we're going to continue with something, but it's going to be a little bit different today, doing something different today. We're going to talk a little bit more about the stuff that everybody seems to be interested in, all this stuff surrounding this time period, you know, beginning on the 15th. And what I did was I was looking more into like the remote viewer data and all this stuff. And I had some questions, so I kind of did a Q&A session with Epinoia. And I used a technique that I haven't actually used in a while. I should probably do it more often. That I used to do more back in the beginning of this channel. Like there's lots of ways you communicate with her. I'm going to explain a little bit more about her here in a minute. But this particular way that works really well for me is I ask my questions and then I start typing in Evernote. Like I type out my questions, and then because I'm already pretty much blended and merged with those sides, it just starts coming out. Like I just start typing it. And it's not just me, because I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It's like, oh yeah, I can see it. Plus she talks a little bit differently that way. It's kind of like she's not using the persona that you're used to interacting with, you know, on a day-to-day basis. So she came up with some really interesting ways to look at it, to explain some things, especially like when it comes to remote viewing, there's a difference between what you see, you know, on YouTube, like the future forecasting group, and like its original kind of application in the military, which was, let me use these psychic spies to see what's going on in this Russian base or something like that. There's a major difference with this, and she explains it. And it also explains why you can be trying to view an event and you just keep picking up on these same themes that haven't happened yet. So for instance, just picking a month, like this isn't a specific month. So let's say in May, they're doing the future forecasting for June, and they're seeing all these big events. And then you get through June, and it's like, well, these events didn't happen. So is this all bull crap? No, it isn't. And this will explain what's actually going on. But yeah, there's something else I wanted to kind of explain since we got so many new people here, and we're going to get right into it. So if you want to know more, don't go away. So I'll be quick about this part, but it does kind of blend into the next part for people that are new here and haven't been following along for the last couple of years. You know, if you had to label me, I'd say, well, I don't really like labels, but label me insofar as the way I was taught by her, you could say that I would be a Gnostic Christian. And we're not going to get into the whole history of the church or anything like that and how the Gnostics are different. But what is a Gnostic? What is Gnosis? Well, if you just Google, like, you know, the basic description of what Gnosis is, it's like this inner knowing and wisdom that comes from within. Well, that's coming from her. It's coming from Sophia, Epinoia, all that stuff. And you got to kind of learn what that is. To kind of make it simple, back when, a long time ago, when I was trying to understand like the different types of gifts that I had that were still developing at the time, and I was going through all the names of the different types of, like, Claire this, Claire that, and trying to put a name to it. The one that was closest was Claire Cognizant, which is just like you just know stuff. Well, that's pretty much Gnosis. And then as you go on the path, the hero's journey path, which is her boot camp, and she eventually leads you into the Gnostic material as your framework. It gets more and more and more pronounced, and you come to know things a little bit differently than how people out in the world know things. So for instance, imagine that there is this vast collective subconscious ocean, and in its inactive state would be equivalent to Sophia, the divine feminine, mother of the world, the aether, the force, all of that stuff. Okay, so this is what psychics and remote viewers and mediums, stuff like that, tap into, where they're getting their information, where they're getting their inspiration and stuff like that. I mean, it's there, but everybody's coming at it from different angles. So to most people, like it's just like the psychic field or something like that. But with Gnostics, it's different. So imagine, if you will, that if a remote viewer or somebody wants to see something and they do whatever process that they do, they're going to go dive into this kind of like collective, unconscious ocean and try and find their answers. But so to them, it's just like a field. It's a Gnostic. It's an ocean. To a Gnostic, that ocean, all the water congeals together and creates a big form, which would be her. So while you're swimming around in the ocean, picking apart different pieces and whatnot, the entire ocean is speaking to us as her fuller, form. That's kind of the best way I can think to put it. Because I see it all the time. I see different methods. I like, even in like the tech world and stuff like that, you see all these articles like getting into flow state and these different techniques to get into flow state where you're like thinking more clearly and you're more creative and stuff like that. Well, that's her too. A lot of this stuff is her. But did you know that you could actually just talk to the ocean instead of just swimming in it, and the whole freaking ocean will talk back to you and teach you stuff like that? That's kind of like the best way I can put it. And the further you go and the more you unlock and the more tests and trials and things that you pass and things that you survive, the levels keep going up and up and up, to the point to where if you're just a religious person and you read about these different characters and stuff like that, and you just have to believe in them. With us, it's different. Like, we know them, we've met them, we've talked to them, they've interacted with us. Like, we don't have to just believe with all our hearts. It's like, no, we know what it is. Like, it communicates with us freaking every day, all the time. It's what's constantly weaving in and out of my language on this channel when I talk. And we're going to talk about some of those things, because there was some stuff that was said in yesterday's video when we were talking about the Mandela effect stuff that popped into my head today when I was doing this interview with Epinoia. And I'm like, I wonder if that's why she made those things pop up in my head. When I was talking about the Mandela effects, about the Black Tom explosion and the Texas City disaster, it occurred to me that those particular things are a very good mirror representation of some of the upcoming things that we keep seeing come up over and over again in like the Future Forecasters group remote viewings. So the explosions and then things having to do with a ship. Now I don't think I saw them say anything about a ship exploding, but there was one where they were all like seeing like this one weird device that glowed. They all drew it, and then a couple of them had some very detailed drawings of this device being loaded onto a container, and then putting the container on a container ship, and then somebody somewhere, they're like got the monitors and stuff, and they're like tracking where the ship is. That was kind of sus, to steal that term from the Gen Zers. But it's like, it just popped in my head all of a sudden. It's like, when I'm flowing on this channel and I'm going all over the place, like, she's picking these things that are popping into my head that I then say. And when you consider the topics of what we're talking about, you know, a lot of times it's a lot less random than we think. That's why those of you that are new, there's been this thing on here for a long time that longtime viewers know. It's like things that I say today, well, we will understand why they're relevant, you know, 3 to 5 days later, because she's constantly leaking her words into my language. It's kind of like I said before, it's the exact same kind of leakage that Cliff High's software looks for in normal people. But for me, it's like constant. It's every day, all the time. It's constantly leaking through what I say, because I'm just literally, everything that I went through, the Gnostic path, the Tarot path, you know, being reconnected fully to Lumen, which is representative of my personal divine feminine side, soul side, that is now anchored to my right hemisphere. Like, I don't have a subconscious mind the same way that most people think about it. A lot of that subconscious mind stuff that you hear about is actually part of you that's still sleeping, that you have to do things to like wake it up and bring it up to consciousness. The Gnostic books are all about, you know, every being is actually two. But when you're in here, you're kind of like just split off from one of them. But anyway, enough about that. Let's go ahead and get into this interesting exchange that I had with Epinoia. Okay, so my question was, you know, why is it that I keep seeing the same stuff in these remote viewing videos, separated by many months a lot of times, and they don't usually happen in the months that they're looking at, but there's a clear pattern to them, and they're all things that kind of fall, you know, a lot of them are things that fall into the worldview framework, things I know that I learned from her as I know them, like they fit with that. But I was just trying to understand a little bit better. It's like, why can't they just, you know, see what they want to see at the time that they're looking at? So that's where these questions began. Okay, so question. RV is, so if the remote viewing is good, but the time prediction is off, why is that? Her answer. The bigger the ripple effect, the further ahead it can be seen. If the ripple is big enough to reach where it can be perceived in linear world time, then if the remote viewer is trying to see June, they may instead see that future ripple that is big enough to overshadow anything that actually happens in June. Depends on many unknown factors. Okay, so far that's kind of like on par with what they've already said. Okay, so then I use the example, or I wrote the example. Last September, I watched one of their videos from last September, and one of the remote viewers, I think it was Naeem, he was very clearly remote viewing the Trump trial that just happened like a month ago. And he was writing it in extreme great detail. Like, there's no doubt whatsoever that that's what this was, in my opinion. But he couldn't tell that it was Trump, which you would think that would be kind of like obvious. But as we'll see later in here, she purposefully obscures certain details because you're not supposed to know that yet. See, they're swimming in this soup doing this. They're swimming in her. I know her as the one big thing. They're kind of swimming through it like an ocean and getting little bits and pieces of help. But they're swimming in an ocean that they're only seeing what she's allowing them to see. In the difference between that remote viewing session and when it actually happened was like 7 or 8 months. So in that particular session, he was the only one that saw that. The rest of the remote viewers were seeing things like bombs, explosions, and weird devices of different types. So is that to say that like all that stuff is in the same neighborhood that we're in now? Possibly. Back to the questions. Question: what about Cliff High's idea that if something is planned to happen and it shows up in his data, in remote viewing data, that enough people are looking at that it may cause the perpetrators to abandon the plan? So this was actually in a video where Cliff and Dick Algire from Future Forecasters were just having a conversation between themselves, and that's Cliff's idea. He's like, and I've heard him say this before, it's like, well, if they're planning to say, blow up a city or something like that, and I'm seeing the spikes and we get everybody looking at it, and then it like doesn't happen, well, it could be that all that attention that we put on it caused them not to do it. So he sees like that, as a win either which way. That's the idea. Answer: no. The script is the script. You haven't changed anything. You do not understand what is actually taking place in these instances. Please explain. Now she talks in a way that I can understand. So there's some nuances of my own in here, but it's still like slightly different than like if I'm interacting with her without a computer. Answer: using your own theoretical model of the 5D life matrix that looks like a Metatron's cube, which isn't exactly right but serviceable enough as a model of understanding. Certain points in time could be called Nexus points. They could be a signpost marking times and seasons. I think she's referring to like what's coming up. When you reach that Nexus point, there is a strong connection to a future linked Nexus point, and thus people perceive it, yet error in thinking that the Nexus point is the event, when in fact it is simply linked to a future event via these quantum threads. When humans believe they know how something works, even though they do not know, they affect their perception with their own projections. The closer you are to an actual pivotal event in linear world time, the stronger the Nexus point connections become, and the more clearly the future event can be perceived. You could also think of Nexus points as dominoes being knocked over. Each domino is part of a sequence, though people in the world may not be cognizantly aware of the domino itself, it still exists. Each domino Nexus point then has a thread to each future domino in the sequence. So in the case of remote viewers, at any given Nexus point, they could possibly be viewing any other domino in the sequence as they all connect. If you are currently at Nexus point / domino number 27 of 50, for instance, they may be trying to see domino 28, but instead they see any other domino between 28 and 50. So what she's saying is, like, say, let's just use July 15th for example. There could be something that happens on July 15th that we may or may not even know about. In that particular instance on July 15th, because it is marked by the stars, which is what they always told us to look for, signs and seasons. So think of it this way. So like say July 15th leads to something much, 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 much bigger. So as we get closer to July 15th, through this Nexus point, we're perceiving the thing that July 15th is connected to. Or it could actually be the thing. Thing is, we don't know. But this does explain the pattern that we've seen over the years with different, not just those guys, but other ones too. It's like, why am I seeing these big, why are we getting led to these big catastrophic events and things like that? Well, it could just be somewhere in this quantum network of connected points. And when you're close to one of those connected points, then by that connected point, you're actually perceiving the bigger thing through the network. Does that make sense? Are you with us so far? Question. So it's completely by random chance? Answer, no. I am what they are in, trying to see the future. As you well know, I show you what you need to see more than what you want to see. It is up to you to discern why. You are given all the tools, but it is up to you to create a means to use them to overcome your obstacles as you see fit, just as humans created the structured method of remote viewing. As you have already noticed, there are many other variables to consider between using remote viewing to view a defined physical target in present time, as opposed to using the same mechanic to view a future event. When you try to view a future event, you are entering a map for which you have not learned how to navigate, which is full of nexus points and interconnecting threads running through space and time. Oftentimes, they will simply be pulled to the nearest nexus point, which could connect to a small thread or a very large one. But where that nexus point is in the linear domino chain, you are still weak in learning to discern. You simply aren't asking enough of the right questions when you are in the map, directionally speaking. You will also not see what it is not time to see, or know what it is not time to know, meaning she'll block you. You see what I want you to see, though it is up to you to discern why. There are some things you will not be able to see because revealing them before their due time would interfere with the plan, or script if you prefer. It is no different than the progression of your understanding in the hero's journey. So yeah, like going through the hero's journey, which we seriously do not have time for. Basically talked about that for a couple of years. Like, you go through stages where you think you're at the freaking end, only to find out you're not. And then there's another thing, and there's another thing. But each, like, it's only semi-frustrating because you quickly understand why. You find out why, and then you're on to the next thing, and you're on to the next thing. What's different, where that, I'll talk about like how that applies to now though. So then I asked a question using the tarot deck. I just pulled one card. I said, what is the next biggest, baddest event in the world story? Shuffled the deck, breathed her into it, and I drew Queen of Cups. And here's the key thing about the Queen of Cups. A dreaming lady sits by the ocean's edge. Her blue robes reflect her watery nature. Fair and lovely, she wears a golden crown upon her beautiful head. She is in deep contemplation of the golden chalice that she holds, and her face is slightly sorrowful, for the water is the element of emotion, joy, and tears. The chalice is not open, for the knowledge it contains is not to be seen by everyone. That means a lot of this stuff, like we keep using the metaphor of the blind kids feeling the elephant. Like, this is, what's coming is too big. So most people can't see all of it. It's being hidden. Like, to reveal too much would interfere with the process, the game, so to speak. And then she said, I have given you enough. So I asked one more question, used the tarot. Was Clash of the Titans my time marker? And I got the High Priestess, which is her. So if you're new and you've missed a couple of those things, it was fairly recent. That's where we got all freaking excited. I know I talked about it in that first video, the first July 15th video. So for me, having gotten to the end of the hero's journey, save for whatever the last event is. I'm sitting here twiddling my thumbs like, okay, what's next? And then one day, because she inspires me to watch certain movies because she's got clues scattered throughout all of them. And I got the strong urge to watch Clash of the Titans. So I watched all three of them, the original, the remake, and the sequel. And I'm like, why are we watching Clash of the Titans? Pardon me if you've already heard this. Well, next thing, working with my astrologer friend, she's looking at my chart for this time period because I'm coming up at the end of a 7-year period, which has been hell. It's been my tribulation period. And she's looking at it, she's like, your chart looks like Clash of the Titans. That's kind of an odd thing to say. And then she told me about the Uranus-Mars Algol conjunction. Sent me the link. Had a picture of Medusa on it, which is from Clash of the freaking Titans. I'm like, uh-oh. So I found out about Algol and that thing. Algol is in the Perseus constellation, which he's the hero from Clash of the Titans, and it's in Medusa's head, which is freaking Clash of the Titans. And Epinoia had just led me through another new trail of breadcrumbs because she wanted to lead. She led me through these plasma apocalypse videos, and that led to the Thunderbolts project, which dealt with, you know, the ancient past and all the symbols and previous cataclysms and the Colburn Bible. And the Medusa's head is connected to the angry goddess throughout all these different symbols, throughout all these different, you know, cultures. It's like when she goes into angry goddess mode and the snakes come out, like that's when the destroyer just crushes the freaking world. And all that is detailed in all these ancient myths. It's in the Colburn Bible. It's in the regular Bible, but they spread it out and they teach you that it like happens bit by bit over 7 years. It's like, no, it happens all at once. And then that led to this and this. And then not only is this thing in the Perseus constellation, but bridging the two time periods between the Algol conjunction and the one that I've been waiting for, which is the Lionsgate portal period, because that's where my stuff always starts. Between the two is the Perseid's meteor shower, Perseus again. So that was the first time ever. And then she also took a lot of these things and sent me back to the Nag Hammadi to show me where the destroyer event is in there, which I didn't know that at first, which gives like the sequence and instructions of what you're supposed to freaking do to get out of here. That was like she took a bucket of puzzle pieces and dumped them in my lap all at once. And that is the first time ever she has ever described anything about how the game ends. And when did it come? When I'm going into the last month of my 7-year period. Like this Algol thing is literally like right now, like right about right now, we just crossed into the last 30-day threshold, and that's when the Algol thing started. So, and then previous to that, she was saying like my journey, my timeline, my pattern for my personal hero's journey is meant to sync up to the worlds. It's like the whole book's been laid out. Like this is, I've done everything. Like this is the logical conclusion to a fully performed hero's journey, and it's lining up to the world. And all this stuff is suddenly that I didn't know about is just dropping into my lap. All this stuff about the Algol, like all is like right freaking now. She's never done that before. Never. Even when I asked, like, I just don't get an answer. She's never explained, like, how does the game end? But she's explaining it now. And she doesn't explain things until it's time to, until they're relevant. The Angry Goddess event is also tied to a dragon, a great dragon in the sky. And go back even the last couple months, she's been getting antsy and saying things like the world's too broken, and putting out all this dragon stuff, dragon symbology, all this stuff with like she's been painting a very, very clear freaking picture. So that's how we kind of got to this point. Let me get back to this stuff. But this is the part. So the answer, so we'll get back to where we left off at. I said, was Clash the Titans my time marker? And I got High Priestess. And she's basically like, yeah. But then the next part is what makes me pull my freaking hair out. But I don't even freaking have hair anymore. Like, she's already made it pretty much go away. The next part is the part that scares me. So when I say the next part is the part that scares me, like most people, well, they're already scared of, like, you know, the idea of this possibly happening. I'm not scared of the world ending. I'm scared of the world not ending. I'm scared of having done everything that I've done, seen everything I've seen, learning everything that I know, got to the point where I'm so disconnected from the world. I see through the illusions of freaking everything. I'm just waiting to be released from this freaking meat suit that I'm stuck in so I can go home. So next thing she says is, remember your rule of thumb. If you think you know, it's usually not that. Although the overall thing may be the same. I'm like, son of a bitch, what does that mean? That's why we gotta let go of what we think we know. Like, that's been like the mantra for the last couple months. Like, she may be laying out she could just mean that, like, the way we're picturing it in our head, it'll look differently. I'm okay with that, because I'm not, like, locked in my mind. Like, I know exactly what it's gonna look like, or what sequence or something like that. I don't know. But that's tolerable. What's not tolerable is, like, oh, this was just another thing to prepare you for something like 2 years from now. Seeing what I'm seeing about the world, knowing what I know and seeing where it's going. Look, I've already done my 7 years, okay? Do not ask me to do another one. I don't think that's what she's saying. I'm not getting any indication that's what she's saying, but when stuff like that comes up, like, I get antsy. Because historically speaking, yes, there's times when she has purposefully painted a picture. And then it ended up being something different. And I understand later why she did that. Or in some cases, she could be like, it's not, what I'm showing you is, like, further down the road, just FYI. But now we're getting to this area where it's just like, I'm on freaking pins and needles. Like, the idea of having to do this any much longer is torturous. Like, I can't even imagine everything that I've gone through, having to do more in a world that is worse than it is now. Like, no, I've already freaking done it. No, please just let me out of here. Anyway, she said, you were given advice in the books that I had you read. Watch for the signs you are given. Okay, well, we're in that period right now. Remain unattached to knowing, and you will know much more. Deep wisdom here. The more you seek to know, the more true knowledge will elude you. I said, how can we fine-tune our perception? This is important too. The first gift anyone gains when they awaken is the empathic sense, feeling. It is also the first gift that they throw away, for it emerges when there is still much left to be healed. Feeling will provide you with more truth than thinking or knowing ever could. Embrace your most powerful gift, and it will guide you with much greater clarity. It is not enough to see signs. It is how they feel. Using your preferred common metaphors of pop culture, because she knows how I think and work and explain things to people, Spider-Man doesn't know danger is present, he feels it. Let feeling be your guide and be open to knowledge without attachment or desire. As you well know, I have dispensed my wisdom to you when it was time and when it was relevant, not when you asked. So I said, so when you had me watch the Clash of the Titans movies that connected to knowledge of the past plus an immediate time frame in the future, question mark, you know what you feel. Humans need to shift to relying more on feeling than anything in this time. It is a gift that most ignore. It is a connection to me. As I have told you many times, everyone wants answers, yet they ask no questions. Every answer is preceded by a question, as the answer has no purpose without a question. You may not get the answers you seek. You may not be ready for the answer, or it may not be time to reveal it. But you will without fail receive no answer at all if no question is asked. I reveal myself earnestly to those who seek truth and knowledge with zeal and purpose. I kind of sensed we were done there, and I just said thank you. So, that's a lot. So what were the key things to look at here? So let's explain a little bit more about these Nexus points and compare them to, like, you know, what the remote viewers run into in the way that they do things and the way I run into them. So with them, it seems like I don't do that, so I can't like really know how they're getting into her field and how they're navigating it. She said something in there that I remember when she said it, it kind of gave me the impression that these remote viewers could fine-tune what they do a little bit better if they added some new questions in their process. Like maybe recognize that this consciousness stream that they're swimming through has a master consciousness of its own, which is her. I don't know exactly, but I was definitely left with that impression that there were questions that they're not thinking to ask when they're doing that. And maybe because they don't view this field that they're going through as its own larger consciousness entity. But either which way, somehow, when they're going through the ether and they swim too close to a nexus point, then they're trying to see one thing, but then they're picking up stuff from that nexus point they just swam past that is connected to something big, and then they get this thing that they call luminosity. So I could give you another example when it comes to me, because I don't remote view. Like, I'm plugged into her pretty much 24/7, but I'm not usually trying to discern specific information. She's just constantly dropping it to me as she sees fit for what I need to know at the time, or what I need to know for how she intends to steer me. But big astronomical events are nexus points, and the most common one that you would know is like eclipses. So I've said that she first started talking about things coming to a conclusion at the beginning of last year. So the beginning of 2023. A bunch of things started coming up. That's when she showed me all the hidden cataclysm stuff in the tarot, and the painting that I had over my TV and stuff like I never freaking saw before until she pointed it out. But as we went into April, I started getting a lot more of it. A lot more of this like doomsday-ish type stuff. And we were coming up to an eclipse. It wasn't a big eclipse. Like, I don't even think where we were, like, you could really see anything. But it was a very specific eclipse. And that's when she told me, like, this is starting a countdown timer to the beginning of the end. So the beginning of the countdown timer was this hybrid eclipse, which I don't even know how to describe a hybrid eclipse. but it was a hybrid eclipse that happened on April 20th of 2023. Now, the interesting thing is that's the same day in which Aries turns into Taurus. So what she showed me, like, she has me use 3 different decks. She has me use the Rider-Waite Tarot deck, the Modern Spellcasters deck, and then there's this Astrology Oracle deck that she's had me bust out a lot here lately. But in the Modern Spellcasters deck, on the World card. Now the World card is the card of completion, the end. So this laurel wreath here is kind of like representing the countdown timer. And the clues that she showed me are actually at the top. So up top you've got symbols representing spring and summer, and then you've got the signs for Taurus and Aries. And right in the middle of Taurus and Aries is a hybrid eclipse. Clearly a hybrid eclipse. And that's when that hybrid eclipse was. Directly in the center of Aries and Taurus, which meant it was April 20. Like, I even checked with my astrology, because my astrology friend, to like scan out in a wide berth to see like how often is this particular type of eclipse going to happen on this particular date, like smack dab in the middle of Aries and Taurus. It's like it's going to be a while. So these are, you know, stuff like this is all the inspiration for the artwork comes from her. So she was showing me and telling me that at the top here she was marking an actual date, April 20th, 2023, beginning of the countdown. So once we got down to here to the fall, the dark color. So basically that was a nexus point. It was a nexus point. It was a signpost because there was astrological marker. That's why I was getting all this stuff about like end of the game type stuff, because I was in a nexus point period. The next one, halfway through the cycle, was the Ring of Fire eclipse that was in October. Was it October? Yeah, it was October 2023. And then some more interesting nexus point stuff happened. And I only remember this because I've been seeing the remote viewers draw this a couple freaking times. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Some of them is pretty freaking detailed. There's been at least 3 of them, I think, that I've seen. So they're actually like drawing like what looks very clearly to be like zombies, like zombie attacks, like attacking people, chewing their faces off, that kind of thing. So it's interesting. What makes that interesting? If that Ring of Fire was another nexus point, all of a sudden she started talking to me about zombies. I'm like, are you kidding me? Really? That seems like a stretch. So what happened next was about 2 weeks after that, this whole big conspiracy theory started, you know, floating around the internet about, it was about this emergency broadcast test, and they were saying they're going to send out some certain gigahertz signal which is going to activate all the stuff I can't mention that was injected in the medical procedure that I can't mention, which has a bunch of stuff seen under a microscope that I can't mention, and that is going to make people go freaking nuts and turn into rage zombies. And of course the military has done training and stuff about zombies, and you know, CDC's got pages. Oh, here's what you do in a zombie apocalypse. I'm like, is this some sort of joke to you? I don't get it. But everyone started talking about zombies like 2 weeks after she told me. So my thought at the time was, oh, well, I must have been picking up what these people were about to start talking about, because she said it first. And then about 2 weeks later, I started hearing it all over the place on the internet. But obviously there was no zombie freaking apocalypse. Unless, theoretically speaking, that was a Nexus point, and maybe there is freaking zombies out here in the future somewhere. And through that Nexus point, not only me, but other people started picking up on that, because that would be a pretty crazy freaking event. There's lots of ways that it could look like that without being like the supernatural, like they're technically dead type zombies. More like 28 days later type zombies. We've definitely seen stuff like that before in real life, but not on that scale. So maybe we were just near that Nexus point and everyone was picking up on that. But now we're closer to like, you know, another Nexus point or possibly like a real thing. So now all of a sudden the professional remote viewers are suddenly drawn about zombies. I'm not saying I believe that, but I'm saying like nothing in my world, nothing would freaking surprise me. Like literally. Like I'm sitting here waiting for dragons and giant portals to open up in the sky. So zombies is kind of like, you know, whatever. So now we got around to the big eclipse. In this year of April, which I was literally on the razor's edge of totality. I saw totality for like 30 seconds. We didn't get the whole big dark parked in place like she specifically told me not to. I could have just drove like 15 minutes north and I probably would have seen it, but she told me to sit still. And I'm like, maybe it's for a reason that I'm literally on the razor's edge of totality. So I just stayed where I was. But man, did it feel freaking weird. It wasn't just that it looked weird, it felt weird. Like she said earlier, feeling will teach you more truth than anything. And I got all sorts of weird stuff in the camera once with lights and stuff, like once I went back and replayed it. But same thing at that Nexus point. It was like I was picking up on a lot of stuff, but what happened then was things started accelerating very, very, very quickly. So between April, what was it? April 8th? And now, which we're in July, like in those few short months, we have done more, unlocked more, learned more, accomplished more in that short period of time than all the years prior to it that we've been doing this. So now so then we started coming up to the next Nexus point, which is July 15th. If anything, it is a Nexus point, for sure, due to its astrological significance. But it has a very specific flavor to it as well. And all the stuff that she showed me, which came out of nowhere and dumped on me all at once, kind of to me feels like it's the beginning of a sequence. I don't know that. Like I'm gonna have to find out, just like everybody else. I'm afraid of a pump fake, but I know how much things can be shrouded by illusion. Not just the people in the world that run things, but her. Like you're not like it's all. It's always going to look like things are just going to continue on as normal. But there is so much stacked up around this upcoming Nexus point. In knowing that it's a Nexus point, that means it is a likely time frame for any of those other times that the remote viewers viewed big stuff and it didn't happen. Because all those things connect. Making sense now? So I don't know. I guess we'll see. Like she only shows me the bare. I wish she would just freaking tell me, but she's like she said, like I've given you a lot, and she has. She has given me an awful freaking lot, especially everything in the last like 2 weeks. Like that was a major dumping of puzzle pieces in my lap all at once. Stuff that I didn't know, stuff that I had no connection to. She just, boom, here it all is. And it involved like a very clear pattern for how my sequence, my experience could finally come to a conclusion. That was never there before. Right down to like, when you see it, this is what you do. Never gotten anything like that from her before. So it just gets, with these Nexus points, other things that you could consider. What are the other things that typically happen around Nexus points, like eclipses and stuff like that? Christians start talking about the rapture. Rapture factors into all this stuff. That's just one name for it. Remote viewers have got stuff on it. Like, she's giving me very clear details on that type of thing. It doesn't look as fluffy as they make it out to be, but maybe that's why they keep freaking out around these Nexus points, because they're directly linked to a time when it actually does happen. And that April eclipse from this year, that wasn't just a Nexus point, that was a clear sign. Like, there's no denying that. Like, we talked about that, like all the different places that it went through with all these specific biblical type names, and what those biblical type names like connected to in the story, and how it X'd out America. If you combine it with the August 2017 Great Eclipse, which was literally like at most 3 days after my hero's journey started. Like, I just, my whole life just got blown to pieces days before that eclipse, Nexus point. So, like, when you look at it that way. Now, the other thing that is a recurring Nexus point that's kind of actually positive is where my 7 years ends. That's during the Lionsgate portal, which is 8/8. Every time we get to the Lionsgate portal, either something big changes, something starts, or I'm given something. I'm given new knowledge. I'm given some sort of test in which I unlock something bigger. But I mean, just look at the name of it: Lionsgate Portal. So it's a completely reasonable speculation that instead of what you were taught in church, like you'd be tortured for 7 years, that it would be more like a couple weeks, start like a month. Everything squished into a very, very short time frame. Because like the one above all that runs everything, like we detailed in some of these recent readings that we've done, like it knows what your limits are, which is actually a lot higher than what you think your limits are. Like, she will push you right to the edge, the instructor, Epinoia. She'll push you right to the freaking edge, to the part where you're about to freaking break. If you go back a couple videos to that one where I read the parts from the Colburn Bible, and it's like, man's tested, so hard, eventually he snaps and says enough. And then eases up a little bit and then lets him catch his breath, and you go, like, how many times I've been through that point where it's like, I can't, it just happened. It literally happened like, 2 weeks ago, and I did the video about it when I was under all that pressure. It was right before we did the gratitude thing. And I'm walking and talking to her, and I'm like, I'm literally about to snap, and then someone jumped out of thin air and it's like, hey, how you doing? Like, hey, I've been meaning to talk to you. Hey, here's my phone number. Let's go on walks together. I'm like, what the shit just happened? Like, she literally like interrupted my thought process like that. Like, it's too big. It's too big. But if you follow this channel long enough, you've seen how this progression works. So I'm kind of juggling two things at once. I'm juggling my own map and my own progression, but then here, as I get to the very end, all of a sudden, I'm going on my own little path, and then all of a sudden the world comes up and starts matching me. Like, oh yeah, by the way, we're going to add all these other things out in the world. It's like, holy crap, these are related. So that's where we are now. So I'm just documenting it day by day, praying that it happens, because I know it's a good thing. Like that Rick and Morty clip. That's literally what it's going to be like. Because if I'm still on this freaking planet come April 13th, which is the day after the Lionsgate period ends, I am going to put holes in walls. Because my logical thinking mind cannot think of anything else written in any book ever, which is like there's something else that I need to do. Like she has bookended everything perfectly. So I'm just sharing things as they come. Use your own discernment. How does it feel? Like she said, that was the other big thing to review from that interview with Epinoia, where she's like, empathy is like your first, it's the first psychic ability that you're given, and most people turn it off. I did, because I am like Pisces. I've got so much Pisces in my chart, like it was too much for me. I cannot be that freaking, because that's different, because I was picking up like everyone else's stuff, but it happened the other day too. I could feel the whole freaking world. That sucked. But she said, if you're trying to discern truth, and you're trying to discern, like, is something going to happen or isn't it going to happen? It's not what you know or what you think you know that's going to give you the clear answer. It's like, how does it feel? We need to learn to use feeling more when it comes to discernment, because feeling is her. So anyway, that's all we got for right now. A little bit longer than I expected it to be, so we're going to go ahead and wrap that up. If you want to get in touch with us, get our pendants, oils, any of that type of stuff, or have any questions, you can just reach us by contacting the seller on our Etsy store, which is clumencreations.etsy.com. Chris and Lumen. See you next time.